नमस्ते, हार्दिक स्वागतं पुनरपि अस्य संस्कृतवर्गस्य तृतीये सप्ताहे. So, namaste and a very warm welcome once more to the third week of the advanced level course of spoken Sanskrit. So, we've been looking at the word forms, at a variety of word forms in the second week, and I hope that you've got sufficient practice and you're a little more familiar with the different word forms. In today's session, which is going to be the first of module 3, which will deal with the revision of the Varnamala, and we look at the upasargas, the prefixes, and also the sandhis. And today's lecture is lecture 7, which will be a revision of the Varnamala, understanding its various dimensions that we have not spoken of explicitly so far. The Maheshwara Sutrani itself, to understand how they are applied, especially in the context of sandhi. We'll also look at the vibrational effects of the Varnaha. So, a little more in detail, the session today will cover the elaborate introduction of the alphabet, अथवा वर्णमालायाः विस्तृत परिचयं करिष्यामः. तत्र वर्णोच्चारण प्रक्रियाम् अपि वयं द्रक्ष्यामः, which is a guide for pronunciation of the varnaha, and that will include the sthanani, the place of pronunciation, and also the prayatnaha, the effort that you're putting in, and these efforts correspond to abhyantara prayatna, which is the internal effort, and the bahya prayatna, which is the external effort. These numbers are something that we look at in greater detail. We'll then move on to the Maheshwara Sutrani, which are also known as the Shiva Sutrani. And Anantaram, we look at Sri Aurobindo's description of the vibrational effects of the Varnas. And as always, we'll try and connect all of that into a conversation for helping you build your vocabulary, as well as to see what points we can incorporate from the lesson itself. Ante ekam shlokam karishyama dhamma vishaye. So, dhammaha being the next value in the series of those concerned with the experience of dharma or the practice of dharma. And to close, there will be a quote by Swami Krishnananda on the concept of dhammaha. So, you would be familiar by now with all these different tables that are coming before you. Tari atra, I've tried to put the different aspects of the Varnamala together. It's still not a comprehensive one, but at least eka vichara bhavati katham asti iti. Tari this is the Varnamalayaha Vistrita Parichayaha. Atra Varnamala, the alphabet itself. The alphabet is comprised of the Aksharani, and the Aksharani can either be called the Akshara or of course the Varnas also. The word Akshara has been very interestingly defined. It's known as, there are two attributes to it. The first one is Shravanendriya Grahyam is an Aksharam. So that which can be grasped by the hearing sense. And then two, so you see it's a very oral thing. It's not a drishti based. It's a Shravanendriya Grahyam. And then second one is that it's a Kantha Talvadyabhighatena Abhivyanjate. I'll do that again. Kantha Talvadyabhighatena Abhivyanjate. So there is this sparsha, there is a place of touch which gives rise to the consonants. And we see that it's very interesting when we're talking of the number of letters in the Sanskrit alphabet. Quite strangely, there is no consensus, there is no standardized consensus always. Kinchit variation asti atra tatra depending on the text you're consulting, depending on who has presented that. So sometimes we talk of 49, which is like 16 swaras and 33 vyanjanas. The 16 swaras would also include the and aha, and also the or the longer one. And then you can also have the 50, which is in the mantra purusha. When they're conceiving of the individual as a mantra purusha, they have the ksham, which is in the ajna, which is included. So that's 50 letters there. And you also have 52, where you're adding the 3. So to the 49, you're adding the 3 samyukta aksharas, which are kshatra and jna. And 59 is the one that I have found in this book, and this is the book that I'll be referring to. It's Samskrita Bharati's, the book called Sandhi by Mahabaleshwara Bhatta Mahodaya, and excellent books. They're books that I would highly recommend if you want to deepen your study of the lessons that we're doing here and of Sanskrit in general. Tari atra they've classified about 59, where they're saying there are 33 Vyanjanas and 22 Swaras, which includes all the Rasva, Dirgha and Pluta, the short, long and the triple long. So that's for the number of letters, and you see common consensus tatra nasti. Anantaram, moving on to the Swaraha or the Ajantaha, Ach, Ach, Ach is the acronym for the vowels in Panini's Maheshwara Sutrani, which we will be looking at. So Swaraha at the Ajantaha, so it can vary between 13 and 23, as we've seen, depending on which are the letters you are including and which are the ones we are omitting. So 13 or 14 Swaras, depends on if you take the L and L, etc. 15 or 16, you incorporate them now, and also take the Ayogavaha. Here they've kept it separately, which is the and the Aha and two others. And then, or you can have it with all the different lengths of the vowels. And then you can see that here you have the three lengths. So Rasvaha is typically 1 matra, Dirgha is 2, and Pluta is 1, 2, 3. So this clapping or this awareness of the rhythm is what also helps to subconsciously build the rhythm in the being. It's very interesting. And then you have the different swaras in which they can be pronounced. So you can have the Udatta, Anudatta and the Swarita. And normally the Udatta would be marked with the, if you have a letter there, so let's say the it would be marked with a thing below it. The Anudatta would have nothing on it, and the final one would have a line on top of it like that. Okay, but it would seldom come on an akara, but still it's there. No, it's there. Agni Mile Purohitam. The very first mantra of the Rig Veda has that Agni Mile. So it starts with an Udatta. So it basically is it's the harmony, it's the harmonizing of the letters with music. Astu. And then we have another two ways of pronouncing them is the Anunasika or the Ananunasika. Anunasika would be the A and the Ananunasika would be the A. So you can say ka, kha, ga, gha. You can do it nasally or non-nasally. So that's the swaras. Moving on to the Ayogavaha, Chatvaraha Santi Tatra. There are 4 of them. You have the Anuswara and the Visarga, so the and the Ah. The there are normally, when you hear it in text, there would tend to be an exaggeration. So you would hear aha. But there are some who say, no, it has to be very strict. So it has to be an ah, that aspirated sound, which is what it is called also, gives a different experience. Tadapi satyam asti, but parampara ritya api kriyate, anya prakaraha api sambhavam asti. Then we have the Jifwa Muliyaha, which is when you have the ka sound. So when you have a Visarga followed by a ka, let's say if you have Balakaha Karoti, which will become Balakah Karoti. So it's like Jifwa Muliya, where the tongue connects there's a Balakah Karoti almost, and that's the Jifwa Muliya. The Upadmaniyaha is the one which you have when you have a pa following a Visarga. So you have Dhiyo Yo Naf Prachodayat. It becomes a f sound almost. Astu tatrasti. And then Vyanjanani vayam pashyama. Vyanjanani, which are also known as the Halanta in the Maheshwara Sutrani. Tatra it can vary between 33 and 36 if you include the Samyuktaksharas. And they are divided into the Vargiya Vyanjanas, which means which are allocated to the different parts of the vocal cord, vocal system. And then you have the Avargiya Vyanjanas, which are not specifically assigned to one and can be a combination of 2 regions. And then of the Vargiyas, there are 25 of them because 5 prominent places of touch. And you have Sparshaha, which are 25, which are the Ka Varga, the Cha Varga, the Ta Varga, and the Pa Varga. Ka, Kha, Ga, Ga, Cha, Cha, Ja, Ja, Ta, Ta, Da, Da, Nya. So Ka, Kha, Ga, 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 Cha, Cha, Ja, Ja, Nya, Ta, Ta, Da, Da, Na, Ta, Ta, Da, Da, Na, Pa, Pa, Ba, Ba, Ma. Alright, those are the 25. And then you've got the Antasthaha. Antasthaha ke santi tatra ya, ra, la, va iti antasthaha. Astu. Punah tatra ushmanaha ke santi sha, sha, sa, ha. Astu. Idanim agre gachama. Tari atra ucharana prakriyaya, there's a guide for pronunciation of the varnaha. Tari, as we've seen, there is a ucharana prakaraha, prathamamasi sthanani, and we are already very familiar with these, the 5 places. Atra they are saying not just 5, but ashtasthanani santi. So what are the 8? So they start here with there is the Jifwa Muliya, then Talu. Talu is the palate, Murdha cerebral, the Dantya the dentals, Oshtya the labials, Kantya the throat, and Uraha the chest, all right, and you've got the letter ha, for example, that corresponds to the chest place of pronunciation. So there are 8 of them, but as we'll see in the following chart, there is a mix of them also. Some letters are a mixture of 2-3 places. And then you have the thing called the prayatna, or the effort that you're putting in. So one is the abhyantara prayatna. So what are that? Sprishta, ishat sprishta. So touch, light touch, ishat sprishta, even less touch, samvritaha closed, vivritaha open, and ishat vivritaha open but a little bit, not all that much. Astu. And then we've got the bahya prayatnas, as you can see, the vivaraha, samvaraha, nada, sound, ghoshaha and aghoshaha, which corresponds to your voiced and unvoiced here. Ghosha is the voiced and the aghosha is the unvoiced. So I realize that again the letters on the picture here might be too small. So please use the PPTs to broaden it, and this was just to try and help you understand correspondence with the English terminologies atra. Anantaram, we had this udatta, anudatta, swarita that we've seen, and shwasaha, the breath is very important, and tatra alpa prana asti or mahaprana asti. But I also wanted to read out to you atra very interestingly from this book itself on Sandhi. So how the extent to which they have analyzed what happens, what is the whole process, mechanism of sound production. Astu, tari prayatna vishay atra vadanti, yada shabda prayogecha bhavati tada kayagni nabhideshat preritaha. So kayagni nabhideshat, that's from your navel center, preritaha pranavayuhu urdhvam akraman murdha paryantam gatva pratinivartate. So that that pranagni is sending the prana up all the way to the murdha, and then it is coming down tatra. Pratinivrittaha saha vayuhu mukham prapya kanthadi sthanani ahatya varnan abhivyanakti. So when it comes back, then it connects to all the different places of pronunciation, and then you have the ucharanam of, or the vaikhari aspect of the letter. Tataha sa eva vayuhu gala vivara vikasadin karoti. Okay. Evancha jihvagra madhya mulai kanthadisthanya bighatartham. So it comes in and then it is touching the different parts of the throat, etc. Okay. And then of course then they go on to say that there are the 2 kinds of prayatnas and all. But I just thought it was worth recognizing again how much of effort has gone into the analysis of every single aspect of the Sanskrit language. Astu. Ataha tesham tatra avadhanena asmakam tasya jnane cha asmakam sanskaranam bhavitum arhati. So understanding what they have done and also trying to engage with it can result in the kind of sanskara of the vocal cord, of the mind making decisions, etc., etc. Agre gachama. So let's look at the varnaha here and the utpatti sthanani, the place of origin, and the sthanajanya varna namani, the names that have been given. And you'll see it's pretty similar there. But atra, it's just interesting to see which letters are assigned which places. Astu tari. So akuha visarjaniya is what Panini says in his Ashtadhyayi. So akuha ku in Panini's grammar, when they're saying ku, chu, tu, tu, it implies the entire group. Astu tari akuha visarjaniya kanthaha. So it becomes a kanthya letter. Similarly, ichu yashanam taluhu becomes talavyaha. Ritu rashanam murdha becomes murdhanyaha. Ritu lasanam dantaha. So it becomes a dantyaha there. And then it is the, I think atra dantaha, we might have to put a visarga tatra. Astu. Okay. And then we have the u. So upa padmaniyaha will be the oshtya in the lips. Okay. So oshtha, and the place is the oshtha and the letters will be known as oshtya. Nyamagananam are the nasika or the kanthadi, anunasika, ai kantatalu. So you see it's a combination. Kantatalavyaha, au kanthostham, kanthoshthyaha. The vakara is a dantoshtya. So some people say wa, it can be a sound, but it's very specifically designated as a dantoshtya. So it's a vakara, viryam. It has a very different effect than viryam, for example. And then they'd be known as a dantoshtyaha. And then you have the Jihva Muliyam, which is the Jihva Moolam as we saw there, Jihva Muliyah. And then Anuswara has the Nasika, both are done at times. And Atra, so Nga, Nya, Hna, Hna, Ma, Hya, Hra, Hla, Hwa. So these are certain set of letters where sometimes there is a permission almost to do it in the other way around. But when we are writing them, the ha comes before. So Brahma, Brahma, and not Brahma or Brahma. So Brahmana and not Brahmana. So it's interesting again. But there are different schools of thoughts. But I tend to go with the way it is written, and that's how I would also encourage people to do it. But like I said, there are traditions that follow it in a particular way, and there is good reasons for them to do so too. So this is Uraha. It's all coming from the chest, and Aurasyaha. So when you do the Gayatri mantra, yada yada Surya Namaskaram karoti, tada Hram, Hrim, Hrum evam asti. Tat karoti chet swabhavikataya eva asmakam yat lungs pradesha asti. The lungs region will get strengthened. Ataha bahushu mantreshu api Hram, Hrim, Hrum etadrisha dhvanayaha bhavanti. These sounds are there in many of the bija mantras because they help to reinforce the pranic system of the being. Let's look at the prayatnas. So there are the abhyantara prayatna, which like we've seen is, and the varnaha, the corresponding varnaha here. So sprishtaha, vargiya vyanjanani. Okay, so all of them are the sparshaha, because in order to produce them you need to touch. Ishat sprishta ada antasthaha, as you can see, yaralava. Then you have the ishat vivritaha. Okay, so shasha saha and vivritaha, those are the swara. Ayu, there's no touch really. And then the samvritaha is the but we see that the later on also we'll have a discussion, can also have an the vivrita option, and the samvrita, the closed. Dvayamapi tatra upayujyate. Punaha bahya prayatnaha ke santi ekadashaha santi. Ekadasha santi. Tari vivaraha shwasaha ghoshaha. So they are all the ka, kha, cha, cha, ta, tha, ta, tha, pa, pha, sha, sha, sa. So they are known as the karkasha vyanjanani or the khar. The khar and all will be Panini's from the Maheshwara Sutrani. Then Sambaraha, Nadaha, Ghoshaha, Ghada. So Ga, Gha, Nga, Ja, Jha, Nya, Da, Dha, Na, Da, Dha, Na, Ba, Bha, Ma, Yara, Lavaha. So these are known as the Mridu Vyanjanani. So I'd like you to also pay attention to these terminologies. Karanam yada vayam sandhim pashyama tadanim etadrisha shabdanam prayogaha bhavishyati. So if you are familiar with this kind of classification, with this grouping, it will make it easier when we are doing the sandhi to identify in which context is which kind of sandhi fit. Anantaram alpa pranaha tu vayam janima. So ka, ga, nga, cha, ja, nya, ta, da, na, ta, da, na, pa, ba, ma, yara, lava. And ete varganam prathama tritiya panchamaha antasthascha santi. And they are all known as a yan. Astu. Antimam asi mahapranaha. Mahapranaha tatra kha, gha, cha, jha, tha, dha, tha, dha, pha, bha, sha, sha, sa, ha. Astu. And atra varganam dvitiya chaturthau ushmanascha tatra shal iti uchyate in Panini's grammar. So let's look at the Maheshwara Sutrani or the Shiva Sutrani. I, un, ril, rik, e, ong. Say it along with me. I, ouch, hayavarat, lan, nyamangana, nam, jhabhai, ghadhadhash, jabagadadash, khapa, chatata, chatatav, kapai, shashasar, hal. Atra, this color scheme is also meant to indicate that when you say ach, it's taking all the vowels into consideration. It's the acronym almost for implying all the vowels. So between and ch, the letters and ch, all the letters excluding the last ones which have the halant, the last consonants which have the halant. Hal signifies all the consonants, and you have the last hal also, which is a technical, has a technical reason for being there, but generally it refers to the consonants. Hash refers to all the mridu vyanjananis that we've just looked at, and khar, all the karkasha vyanjananis that we've seen. Now let's look at some of the vibrational effects of the varnas that Sri Aurobindo has described based on his own sadhana, where he found that each of these letters represented a certain force of consciousness, because the movement is from being to becoming, where there was no movement and then creation began. That's why creation is also known as Jagat, that which is in movement. Samsara, it is in movement. You see all these verbs. So Sri Aurobindo, in the silence of his meditations, he allowed himself to be impacted by these sounds and tried to find the corresponding psychological experience it evoked in the individual. Tari Sahavadati, I'll not read out the whole thing, but Sahavadati, is absolute existence. And it's quite an experience. If you just close your eyes and do the sound, you'll see that it opens up the being in an amazing manner. Astu, tari pratnam krito karotu. So what I would suggest is maybe before you really look at this, you can press the pause button, don't look at it, and just close your eyes and try to do each of the sounds and see if you can become sensitive to the vibratory effect of the sounds. That's a whole different level of sensitivity of the being. Astu. Anantaram, these are some more where he's also talking of the consonants, and he has his whole theory that he elaborates in the Origins of Aryan Speech, writing by him, where he says, in fact, the whole of the Vedas needs to be understood from that perspective. Where you go to the etymology of the word, you understand the root sound, the root vibratory effect, and then you experience the creative power of sound itself, which is what the mantra is all about. So, he's done a remarkable work to do a kind of a philological comparison between different languages and then put forth his theory of the origins of language and the role of the sound and the meaning in that. Tari Sambhashanam Kurma. Hari Om Piyusha. Sarvam Kushalam Asti Kim?
Pranamah Arye. Sarvam Kushalam Asti.
Tava Varnamalayaha Abhyasaha Katham Chalati?
Abhyasaha Samyak Chalati. Parantu Mama Tatra Ekaha Samsayaha Asti Arye. Kechana Akaraha Iti Vadanti. Anni Tasya Eva Uchcharanam Akaram Eva Kurvanti. Kripaya Tasya Prakaran Bodhayatu.
Astu Shrunu Sankshepena Vaktum Prayatishyami Athava Prayatishye. Akaraha Prathamataya Ekaha Swaravarnaha Asti. Swareshu Prathamaha Akaraha Eva Asti. Ataha Paninehe Vyakarananusaram Tattu Ach iti bhavati. Tasya yada ekamatra bhavati tada hrasvaha ityuchyate. Yada tasya matra dvayam asti tada dirghaha bhavati. Trimatrikaha bhavati chet plutaha bhavati. Swara sandarbhe saha udattaha anudattaha swaritaha cha bhavitum arhati. Yatha punarapi tasya anunasikah ananunasikah cha bhedau staha. Yatha iti. Evam akarasya ashtadashocharana bhedaha bhavitum arhanti.
Uttamam. Aham shrutavan yat kechana ka kha ga gha ityasya sthane ka kha ga gha iti uच्चारयन्ति. बंगदेशे अन्य पूर्व प्रांतेषु तु प्रायशः जनाः क ख ग घ ङ इति वदन्ति. किमर्थम् एतादृशः भेदाः सन्ति इति कृपया बोधयतु.
उत्तरभारते तु प्रायः अकारस्य संवृतोच्चारणं भवति. प्रयत्नः संवृतः अस्ति. तत्र दक्षिणे तस्य विवृत्तोच्चारणं भवति. तर्हि इति मत् अनुसारम् अथवा मदनुसारं बङ्गदेशेषु मधुरप्रियाः जनाः प्रायः मुखे रसगोल्लां स्थापयित्वा वर्णमालायाः उच्चारणम् अकुर्वन्. अतः अनिच्छन्नपि क ख ग घ ङ इति जातं स्यात् इति मन्ये. परिहासार्थम् उक्तं मया. अतः कृपया अन्यथा मा नय.
धन्यवादः आर्ये. चिन्ता मास्तु. भवत्याः उद्देश्यं सम्यक् अवगच्छामि. इदानीं स्पष्टम् अस्ति. किन्तु मम इतोपि एकः प्रश्नः अस्ति. श्री अरविन्दमतानुसारम् अकारस्य उच्चारणेन स्पन्दनेन च कः आन्तरिकानुभावः जायते।
महर्षयः वदन्ति यत् अकारस्य उच्चारणम् अस्मान् शुद्धसत्त्वम् एब्सल्यूट् एक्सिस्टेन्स् अनुभावयति अथवा तत् प्रतिनयति। सः च अस्माकम् अन्तराकाशः, सः स्वरः च अस्माकम् अन्तराकाशस्य अवस्थां दर्शयति। यथा यदि कश्चन क्लिष्टस्वरेण आ इति वदति तस्य अन्तःस्थितिः कष्टकरी भाति। तथैव उन्मुक्तस्वरेण यः आ इति वदति सः मुक्तस्वभाव इव भाति। अतः अकारस्य विमुक्तोच्चारणेन जीवः निष्कामः मुक्तः च भवितुम् अर्हति इति ओङ्कारस्य विवेचनकाले माण्डुक्य उपनिषदि वर्तते।
अस्तु आर्ये, अधुना अहम् अवगच्छामि किमर्थं श्रीकृष्णः गीतायाम् अवदत् अक्षराणाम् अकारोऽस्मि इति। बहु धन्यवादः।
अस्तु, धन्यवादाः पीयूष। किञ्चित् स्पष्टमस्ति इति आशासे अथवा आशां करोमि। यदा अवसरः मिलति अकारस्य अभ्यासम् अवश्यं कुरु, लाभान्वितः भविष्यसि इति मे सुदृढः विश्वासः। शुभमस्तु ते सदा।
प्रणामः आर्ये।
Let's move on to the general definition of dharma, which is kshama satyam. So it'll be great if you can learn it up by the end of this course, because it's a very important one. So kshama satyam damah shaucham danamindriya sanyamaha ahimsa guru shushrusha tirthanusaranam daya arjavam lobha shunyatvam deva brahmana pujanam anabhyasuya cha tatha dharma samanya uchyate iti. So, we've already looked at Kshama Satyam. In this class, we'll look at what is the definition of Damaha. So, let's look at the general definition of Damaha. तर्हि दमस्य लक्षणं किम् अस्ति इति पश्यामः। कुत्र वर्तते? पद्मपुराणे क्रियायोगसाराध्याये अस्ति। तत् शब्दकल्पद्रुमे प्राप्तम् अस्ति पीयूषेण। तर्हि कुत्सितात् कर्मणो विप्र यच्च चित्तनिवारणं स कीर्तितो दमः प्राज्ञैः समस्त तत्त्वदर्शिभिः। किम् अस्ति तत्र? सो इट् सेस् कुत्सितात् कर्मणो विप्रः। वयं सन्धिविच्छेदं कुर्मः। कुत्सितात् कर्मणः विप्र, हे विप्र, यत् च चित्तनिवारणम्। अस्तु, तर्हि तत्रापि अस्ति अत्र कर्मणः विप्र यत् च, सो देट् विल् बि यत् एण्ड् च चित्तनिवारणं। सः, अत्र विसर्ग आगच्छति, सः कीर्तितः विसर्ग, दमः प्राज्ञैः, कैः उक्तमस्ति? प्राज्ञैः, द वैस् पीपल्। समः तत्त्व, समः अपि अत्र अस्ति विसर्ग, तत्त्वदर्शिभिः। अस्तु, एतैः जनैः उक्तमस्ति। किम् उक्तं? लेट्स् लुक् एट् द ट्रान्स्लेशन्। ओ प्रीस्ट, हे विप्र, द नॉलेजेबल पीपल हु नो ऑल रियालिटीज, तत्त्वदर्शिभिः, and prajñaiः, say that the restraining of mind from the bad works is called damaha. Kutsitat karmanaha vipra. You'll see that there's a doubling of the makara, and we find this doubling of letters quite a lot in ancient texts, which is not so prevalent in today's modern literature. But so kutsitat karmanaha vipra yat cha chitta nivaranam, to remove your consciousness from any kind of kutsita, any kind of lowly action or thought or any of that. That faculty was known as damaha or self-control. So let's move on to the final section of our lecture, which is a quotation by Swami Krishnananda on the concept of Dhamma as one of the Shat Sampat in the Sadhana Chatushtayam. Swami Krishnananda has got very, very insightful works on the Upanishads that are all available on the net, and you must access if you're interested in this field. So he says that the Sadhana Chatushtaya is a fourfold way of self-control, cleansing oneself, purifying oneself, making oneself fit for the entry of that which is supremely divine. These four ways or methods of practice are known as Viveka, Vairagya, Shat Sampat and Mumukshutva. Now, this third requisite is called Shat Sampat, the acquisition of 6 values. They are called Sampat because they are actually treasures, very valuable things. The 6 virtues are Shamma, Dhamma, Uparati, Titiksha, Shraddha and Samadhana. Now, Shama is the restraint of the internal organ, which is the mind. And Dhamma is the restraint of the sense organs, the discipline of the organs outside. Dhamma is the restraint of the 5 organs, the eyes, the ears, the sensations of every kind. There are 5 senses of knowledge and 5 organs of action. The eyes have a passion to see certain things, and there is a passion for every sense organ. Passion is an uncontrollable desire. A desire that has overcome you and flooded you is called passion. Desire is the beginning stage of an overwhelming, consuming longing. Desires insinuate themselves into you gradually, like diseases that crop up inside without your knowing that they are there and manifest themselves only afterwards through the body. So, Dhamma is the ability to control these urges or these longings that we unconsciously and sometimes we tend to cultivate or we get absorbed by. So this is what Dhamma is all about, and it's very, very powerful how they say that the leader, if you want to be a true leader, they say the first thing that you have to learn is Indriya Sanyama, which means if you know how to control your senses, then there's no one who can ever tempt you or bribe you. You will follow the path of what is right. So here are some references here, and we have this book also by Swami Krishnananda, which is available on the net as shared with you. Bahu dhanyavada. I hope you have enjoyed rediscovering your vocal system by going through the Varnamala in greater detail. Tari agrima vare vayam upasargadi nam vishaye charcham karishyamah. Namaste. Punar milamaha.